sitting in front of a window. Now I feel like I'm in this Stephen King, like, go, 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 and I'm for it. Hi guys, I'm back with another video. Today we're gonna do my October reads. That was me posing for a thumbnail. Okay, I'm just gonna dive right in. I'm gonna try to do reviews that are better than me saying, this is a really good book, because that's exactly what I did in last month's video, so. Anyway, first book I read was Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. I got the large print edition because they didn't have the regular print edition. And this is a bookmark that was the Book Riot October challenge, which I completed, and you can check out on my Instagram at KristinBetweenThePages. So Little Fires Everywhere. So it follows a family, the Richardsons, who have four kids, and then the two parents. They're very high in society. And then it follows a mother and daughter, Mia and Pearl. And it's kind of like how these two families, very, very different dynamics, have their lives intertwined. There's a lot of drama that goes on. There's a lot of political and moral, and there's a lot to this story. This I have seen everywhere. This is known as like the book club book. I don't know if it deserves the hype that it's been getting. I didn't personally think so, but I can see why this is a good book for book clubs, if you will. I will say, the author has an incredible way of intertwining narratives. It still blows my mind. She's able to take a perspective from one character and somehow transition it to another, and they have nothing to do with each other in that moment, and you have no idea how you went from one character to the other so quickly, but you do, and I was blown away. The writing's incredible. I would recommend just checking it out just to see what the hype is about. It's been on the New York Times bestselling list for so long. It's everywhere. It's the book club book. So, very good. I enjoyed it. I took a little bit of time reading it. I think I enjoyed the perspective of the children much more than the adults. But there's so many layers, and there's so many characters, and there's so many perspectives. And just to see what the hype is about, I would definitely recommend this one. The next book I read this month was The Dark Descent of Elizabeth Frankenstein by Kirsten White. This was so incredible. I can't get over it. I want to keep talking about it. It was so good, and I had such a blast reading it. I'm glad I read it in the beginning of the month because it kind of set the tone for the rest of my October reads. Wow. I remember being at BEA and hearing about it and thinking, I need to get my hands on it. It's so good. It's not too long. It's under 300 pages. It's a retelling, if you will. I don't know if retelling is the right word. It is an alternative point of view of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, but it's from Elizabeth Frankenstein's point of view, who is Dr. Frankenstein's wife, and it was so fun and so interesting, and it definitely made me want to read more YA that takes place in the past. I read Frankenstein when I was in college, and by read I meant I read some and didn't read all of it. I understand the whole point of what Frankenstein is and who Dr. Frankenstein is. I think whether you read Frankenstein or not, whether you understand Frankenstein or not, I would read this in a heartbeat again. Like, this is so good. I absolutely loved it. I think the YA community had its mind blown with this. It was so fun. Perfect timing of when it came out. Good PR on this one. I'm very happy I read this. This was so good. I want to read so much more like this. The characters were so fun. I don't want to explain what happens because the whole point is that it's a retelling and there's like a twist, and if you know how Frankenstein ends and then you read this, it's kind of like what Wicked did to the Wizard of Oz, if you will, even though that was a prelude. This is more, just if you know how Wicked is and the concept of like a deeper understanding in order to understand what happens in Wizard of Oz. Does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense. That's kind of what this does. Just read it. It is so good. The next book I read this month took me a little while to get into, but it's Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Ngan. I might be butchering that last name. This book doesn't come out until November. I forgot the date completely. I think one of the beginning Tuesdays in November. And it's fantasy. This is a little risque, and I'm going to stick by that one. So in this world, there's 3 different members of the society. There's demons. There's this, I don't know if it's steel caste, I forgot, but then there's this middle caste where it's part demon and then part person. So they're higher ranked, and then there's the mortals. And if, like any fantasy and then system, there's the really oppressed, and then there's the people in power. And we've seen this in a lot of dystopian and fantasy books, so that is not that different. But what is different is that the paper girls are concubines for the demon king. And the main character, main character, is taken from her home and brought to become a paper girl. And while she's there, she falls in love with another one of the paper girls. And it's hard to read at times because the demon king basically is raping these girls. Some of the girls fall into the manipulation and love the attention, and they like feeling wanted by the king, but we know as readers that they're being raped constantly. So it's definitely risky. The topic is hard. There's some scenes where it was very difficult to read, but this is so captivating. I think for fantasy, this is really good. It's set up for the next book very smoothly. I'm definitely going to check out the second book when it comes out. Will I see this series through? I don't know. I have a really hard time with series, especially fantasy series, but I think something about this is different enough where I definitely want to know what happens. If you like fantasy, check it out. This is going to be all over. I already know it because this is going to be the new fantasy story. But it's 2 girls that fall in love, and I'm so happy to see these elements being present in YA, because there's communities of YA that aren't in narratives, and now they are, and I'm really happy to see that. So this is the 3rd book of the month. So after that, I read the highly anticipated What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. This is a fat book, but it's so good. Was it worth the hype? Hell yes. Did I love it at first? No, I actually didn't like it at all. So the story follows Arthur and Ben, and it's really all about their meet cute in Manhattan, and then their progression of friends to dating to boyfriends and just overcoming different obstacles that they're facing. The one main character, Ben, he's going through a breakup, and he's very whiny at first, and I was totally turned off. I just don't like the whiny YA character. The YA character that is going through a breakup when the narrative begins, to me, is very annoying, because they feel like this relationship that just ended, it's the end of the world, I can't go on. And then of course they do, because the whole point of the story is moving past that breakup. So that's Ben. He's super negative at first, he's super cynical, and he's just very whiny, but I definitely got past that. Their story together is so cute. It's one of those, by the end, you feel all warm and fuzzy. I've never read anything by Adam Silvera, even though I've heard about him all throughout the YA community, but Becky Albertalli I'm a fan of, and I absolutely loved Simon. I did not love Leah on the Offbeat that much, but she has a really good way of ending her stories on such a good note. And I could definitely have sensed parts of this is a very Becky thing, if you will. But like I said, I don't know how Adam's writing style really is, but this came together well. It's worth the hype. I don't think this is gonna go away anytime soon, and I'm very glad I read it. So my last 2 books are actually books I started when I did my October readathon. Not readathon, when I did my October reading vlog. If you didn't see that, check out my last video where it was kind of an epic fail. But the first book that I finished, it was actually, none of these I finished during the vlog, because one of the books that I started is Only a Breath Apart by Katie McGarry. Katie McGarry is she has many YA books. I'm a big fan, especially of her Thunder Road series. That's so fun. But Only a Breath Apart follows Jesse and Scarlett, who were childhood best friends, and as they got older, their friendship grew apart, and of course they fall in love. Typical YA, but that's what's so great about it. And they overcome very hard things. Scarlett's father is abusive, this isn't spoiling anything. You know this from the very beginning. And Jesse has this deep connection to the farm that his family has had, and he believes he's cursed because of the land. And again, not spoiling, you find all this out within the first 5 pages. I got very, very, very emotional reading this, and I didn't expect this at all. And while this story is a love story, it's equal parts a surviving story and overcoming really bad hardships that are in families that you're kind of placed in without having any choice in the matter. This book comes out January 2019. I was lucky enough to get a copy sent to me. I'm a big fan of Katie. If you haven't checked out any of her other novels, I definitely would. She has a bunch, and they're really good, and she's really good at build-up, and her romances are steamy in that YA sense. I have all these pages like annotated and lines I really like, which I'm not going to read because, like I said, this one got me very emotional, and I felt very vulnerable when I was reading it, so I'm not going to share those lines right now because it is a bit personal, but this is so good. If you want it for the YA contemporary romance, read it. If you want it for a little bit more of that emotional element, also read it. The last book I read, I'm very, very, very proud of. I hinted at this in my reading vlog. I have a love-hate relationship with Stephen King. He's one of those authors I really want to like, and I've struggled through every single book I've read of him. Misery took me 7 months to read. The Shining, I started it, didn't read it for 6 months, and had to listen to the audiobook. And don't even get me started on it. But I read Revival by Stephen King in a week, which is still a long time for me to read a book in a week. But I did it, and I'm so glad I did, and it's sticking with me, and something about it I really liked. I'm just so happy that I finished it in a week. This does not happen to me. The story follows Jamie Morton on the span of his entire life. When he's younger, a young Reverend Jacob moves into his town with his wife and his son, and everyone's fascinated by all of them. And then a tragic accident results in the Reverend's wife and son dying, and he loses his faith completely. Their paths keep interconnecting. And the Reverend is obsessed with electricity and the power electricity has. So he kind of fills that space of what God had in his life with this obsession with electricity. This is not like a horror like some of Stephen King's books. The end of this book gave me chills. He just has a way of really getting you in this story. I cannot believe I'm supporting Stephen King right now. The end of the story is definitely very, very ominous and freaky, and there's this really intense scene, and I'm not going to get into it because 1, I don't think you get it if you don't know the build-up, and 2, I'm not ruining like the most climactic part of the entire story. But nonetheless, I read this in a week, pat myself on the back. Long story short, the reason I don't really like Stephen King is I feel like he fills in all his books with excess detail. I'm not going to read 1,000 pages of knowing what a tree looks like. That's an exaggeration. But nonetheless, I finished off my month with Revival. I'm so happy I did. To read a Stephen King book right on the cusp of Halloween, it was very fitting. 6 books. 6 books down. I didn't get to 10, but I think 6 is just as good, and they're pretty fat, I think. I hope you liked this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe and follow my Instagram, yada yada yada, the same spiel, but you should still do it. Thank you for watching. Happy reading in November. Bye.